They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Meng. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Meng, and today is a solo episode. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, it is a nutso day in my house. We have another snow day. My daughter got up at 5 a.m. this morning asking, I don't even know what she was doing, but full disclosure, she just fell asleep on the couch at 9 o'clock in the morning, so my whole day is going to be messed up because she's not going to nap in her normal time. So I'm just rolling with the punches right now with all 5 kids at home, and I'm going to knock out this episode for you guys. So today I wanted to talk about good mother messages and bad mother messages that we tell ourselves, that I tell myself all the time. Hey, if you do this, you're a good mom. If you do this, you're a bad mom. And those emotions that we go through, and how to reframe that narrative for ourselves so that we can have a better relationship with our kids and a better relationship with ourselves. I want to hit on 5 points in this podcast today. The first is recognize. The second is remember. The third is values versus rules. The fourth is celebrate. And the fifth is compassion. So for each of these 5 points, I have some stories to share about my own journey, and I hope some good food for thought as you move forward with your own kids and your own relationships. So as a young mom, I believed deep down that I could not meet the criteria of good mother because I was basing my worth on the way my kids responded to me in obedience and sleep, in their temperament and personality, and in achievement. Were my kids fighting? I wasn't a good mom. Were they throwing fits? Bad mom. Meltdowns over wearing pants or eating oatmeal? I was doing something wrong, clearly. They couldn't seem to grasp their ABCs or basic addition. I wasn't trying hard enough. Failure, failure, failure. I just could not get it right. I was a bad mom. I was basing my good mother performance on my ability to be present, available, creative, and able to overcome every obstacle all the time. So a funny story about this, when my twins, who were my oldest kids, were probably, 18 months old or so, I was just so tired. And looking back at the story, of course I was so tired, but we were sitting on the couch one morning and they were watching TV and I fell asleep. And I woke up, I don't even know how much time had passed, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and I was mortified that I had fallen asleep. And nothing bad had happened while I was asleep. I think maybe some toys had gotten dumped out, but the kids were safe. They were still watching their show. But I felt this deep sense of shame that I had somehow failed. And I thought, I cannot tell this story to anyone. What would they do if they knew that I fell asleep while watching my kids? Now that I'm plus 14 years past this incident, I'm kind of like, what was I thinking? Of course, it was fine that I fell asleep. Sleep happens. Mothers fall asleep all the time while they're at home with their children, and it's okay. But at the time, I felt like my job was to just be present and aware all the time. And if I didn't meet that criteria somehow, that I was a bad mom. I eventually confessed this story in very hushed tones to some of my mom friends, and they were like, oh yeah, that happened to me last week. And I thought, okay, I guess this isn't such a big deal. I guess that I'm normal, and I guess that my needs matter, like sleep. So just a funny story about what I thought being a good mom was all about. Apparently it's staying awake all the time. So here's some other messages that I needed to recognize or that I have believed about myself in my motherhood. So I think that recognizing where these messages come from is so important. Maybe recognize that we hold criteria for ourselves that have come from our own childhood, maybe things that our mom did or our grandmother did or we saw in other moms around us, or they're things that the culture is telling us. So here's some good mother messages that we have to recognize. Good mothers do family dinner every night. Good mothers stay home with their kids. Good mothers breastfeed. Good mothers work outside the home. Good mothers read to their kids every night, volunteer at their kids' schools, never raise their voice, play with their kids for hours, do crafts, throw huge birthday parties every year. Good mothers make cloth diapers and their own baby food. So I have believed all of these messages at one point or another in my life and pursued them to their very end. So whatever messages that you have in your own head, I think the point is that we have to recognize where they come from and realize that these messages are coming from outside of ourselves or from our past, and that they really have nothing to do with what it means to be a good mother. A lot of times these messages are perpetuated on social media or through family conversations, or even pressures that we feel we have to fulfill in order to feel good about ourselves. Recognizing these messages, whether they're coming from outside of ourselves or from internal pressures, is key to figuring out why we feel like we're failing if we don't meet these expectations that we hold for ourselves, or the expectation that we hold up for the good mother model. The number 2 is remembering that a relationship includes two people, love for yourself and love for your child. So in pushing aside those cultural expectations or internal expectations or family expectations, and just focusing on how can I love myself and love my child well, and that relationship is going to look different than any other relationship you've had in your life, whether it was a relationship you had with your mom or a relationship with an older child versus a younger child. Being a good mom doesn't come from upholding standards that the world screams at us, but rather from this unique bond that we create between ourselves and our children. So what does this child need? What do I need? I was homeschooled growing up, and being homeschooled was something that my family believed in as a value and believed that this was a right way to raise children, a right way to educate children. So when I grew up and I had my own children, that pressure and that internal voice was there. When my twins were getting to be school age, I just went through this huge upheaval in my heart because I thought, hey, good mothers homeschool their children, but I didn't want to homeschool my children. So I had this huge war going on inside of me about what I should do, whether I should honor this expectation or I should honor myself. There was a lot of thinking, there was a lot of writing, there was a lot of internal dialogue and external dialogue going on, and ultimately my husband and I decided to send them to public school, and this was the right decision for us. And I realized that after they were in school and they were doing well. But a few years went by and their schooling experience continued to go really well, including my son getting special education services that he needed to succeed. This new school opened up, though, when they were entering 3rd grade, and it was a hybrid school, which I thought was really cool. It was teacher-led, but a lot of parental involvement, and the kids would go to school 3 days a week, and they would be at home 2 days a week, and it seemed maybe like it could be this perfect blend between homeschooling and public school. And that little voice inside of good mothers homeschool their kids was nagging at me again. So I went to all these meetings about this hybrid school, and I was really excited about it and very seriously considered it. But my kids were thriving in public school, and by this time I had 2 other little boys at home, and I was struggling with my mental health. And I thought, what's best for me and what's best for my kids needs to be forefront here, not this message of good mothers do this that is inside of me, like preaching at me. So I thought, hey, I'm going to stick with what's working right now. And what was working was public school with these special education services. And I didn't switch them to the hybrid school, even though it could have been a really cool experience. So in that way, I was saying, hey, what is best for my kids and my situation, and not caving to this voice that was screaming at me about what I should be doing. Another instance that I think about when I think about what is best for me and what is best for my individual children is physical touch with my kids. Now, I'm not a touchy mom. I really honestly have to remind myself, hey, hug your child. I don't know why this is. My love language isn't touch. But my kids have various levels of need when it comes to touch. My oldest son, who's 14, he pretty much never hugs me, ever. He's also autistic, so it just doesn't come naturally to him, having physical touch and hugs and things like that. But I know it's important, so I try to pat him on the back or rub his shoulder or ask for a hug from him occasionally. Though if I get a hug from him spontaneously, like once a month, I'm feeling pretty good. But that's his needs, so I try to reach out to him. I try to really embrace him when he offers it, but he has that unique touch need. My younger son, who is 7, he is like a burrower. He wants to snuggle all the time. He wants to cuddle and hold my hand and snuggle on the bed and do all of the touching. And I really sometimes get touched out when it comes to his physical affection needs. But I have to remind myself that this is what this child needs, while also setting some boundaries for myself so I don't feel irritated by it. My daughter, on the other hand, I don't feel emotionally overwhelmed by her physical needs. I don't know what it is. She just has a different energy, and I do enjoy snuggling with her. So with my son, it feels needy. With my daughter, it just feels affectionate. And I don't know what that is. Some kids are like that. Some kids just bring out different emotional responses in us. So I'm trying to learn to honor my own needs while honoring my kids' needs, and not necessarily say kids need 7 hugs a day in order to feel emotionally healthy and well, by some article that I read online one day, or whatever the statistic might be. I'm trying to focus on, what does this child need and what do I need, and how can I honor both of us in our relationship? This leads us into number 3. Make your motherhood values stronger than your motherhood rules. I have all these Facebook memories that pop up for me and reminding me of where I've been and how far that I've come in my motherhood. And I had one pop up the other day with my twins were 2 years old, and I wrote that I was so frustrated. My kids were throwing huge fits, and I was just really having a hard time. And in the comment section, I got more specific, and my 2-year-old hadn't said thank you for something I had given him, and I was making it like a really big deal. Like I was making it this stickler of a rule. And then I wrote, then he wants me to hug him when he's upset, and I really just don't want to. And I just remember, I can just zoom in on that memory and see myself sticking to a rule of, when mommy gives you something, you say thank you, and pressing that issue until he was upset. And then I felt frustrated and wanted distance when he needed comfort. And in that instance, I was pressing a rule over a relationship, a motherhood value that says, my kids will be polite. They will know their manners. I'm going to teach them in every instance to uphold these values that I have for our family. Instead, and what I've learned over the years with my other kids, is that the rule or the value doesn't need to be greater than the relationship. And I've learned to step in and say, hey, I see you're having a hard time. Let me just hug you until I feel your body calm down, and we'll try again another time. I'm not going to make this a big deal. I'm not going to make this a hill that I die on over my relationship with you in that moment. So I had to learn that. It's kind of a painful memory to see how emotionally out of tune I was. But I have a lot of grace for myself because I was new at this. And I was learning how to be connected to my kids. And I was learning about what it means to have a relationship. But at that time, I thought I was being a good mom by teaching them these things and pressing the issue with them. I thought that having polite kids and teaching them manners was what it meant to be a good mom. But when I look back, I see that I was prioritizing that over relationships. And I've had that shift to say, no, what it means to be a good mom is having emotional connection when my kids are upset, and that's more important than these rules. A more current story about this that I'm still learning, valuing peace and my inner calm at dinner versus making my kids eat all the vegetables that I really want them to eat. So if I'm looking at the good mother messages I'm telling myself, I would say good mothers serve their kids homemade healthy food every night. And this is I put this pressure on myself, like this is 100% me. And I do enjoy cooking, but I have realized that I really have been bothered about my kids' attitudes at dinner lately. And then that affects the way that I interact with them. I get mad, I feel frustrated that they don't eat when I serve them. And because there's 5 of them, there's a lot of protests coming from them a lot of times, even though I'm like, this is good food. You need to be thankful. Lately, I've said, I need to value my peace at dinner and my calm that affects the rest of our evening more than serving a stir fry that has 7 different vegetables in it. So lately I've said, okay, I'm just going to serve Asian chicken with broccoli instead of stir fry with peppers, onions, broccoli, peas, and carrots in it. And the kids eat the first food better than the second food. And I have more peace and calm in my heart and in my evening instead of getting all worked up because the kids don't eat the food that I serve them. So I'm striving to have a better relationship with myself and honoring my own emotional needs versus the good mother message that I have to serve my kids vegetables in order to feel like a good mom every day. Number 4 is celebrating the life you are creating for your kids versus feeling bad when you are not measuring up to the culture or other people's news feeds. And this cropped up for me just recently with Valentine's Day. And I looked through my news feed and I saw these really pretty Valentine boxes that moms had created for their kids, or a special Valentine's Day celebration at school where the mom went to school and had the party with the kids, or a beautiful dinner that they created for their family to celebrate Valentine's Day. And I didn't do any of that stuff. And at the end of Valentine's Day, I was like, man, I really should have stepped it up. Or remember last year you got those little chocolate boxes? Maybe you should have done that. Like, what if your kids don't feel loved? And I'm like, okay, pull back here. What was happening in your day? And the truth is, like, I had a sick kid home that day. My toddler was coming down with a bug. I mean, there were a lot of things going on in my life in the previous weekend where I just didn't have the mental space to shop for special things, or that wasn't a priority for our family. I did get a pizza because a couple days before, my 7-year-old had said, hey mom, can we have a good dinner for Valentine's Day? And I'm like, what's a good dinner? As I looked at my plate of marinated chicken, cilantro, lime, rice and beans, and fruit that I had served that night. And he's like hot dogs or pizza. And I was just like, okay, buddy, yes, we can have a good dinner for Valentine's Day. So I did get pizza from the grocery store, and we had pizza that night. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing for my family for Valentine's Day. But it still rubbed up against what other people were doing. And I had to really pull back from that and say, okay, I need to celebrate what I do for my kids in the special moments, and I have to have grace for what was going on in our life at that moment. I can't compare it to what other people are doing. So when that guilt crops up, stepping back to celebrate what our family does is so important. So another instance of this where that guilt crept in, that I'm failing as a mom, I'm a bad mom, was looking at extracurriculars and sports and other activities that other families do, whether it's their cousins or people that I see on social media. I see Saturday morning activities or evening activities, and I think, oh, we're not doing any extracurriculars right now. I really need to get my kids signed up for soccer. I really need to join the Y so they can do swimming lessons. I'm failing as a mom. I'm a bad mom. I'm not giving them these experiences. What kind of childhood are they going to remember of not having these same experiences as other people? And then I thought, what kind of childhood am I giving my kids? And I looked over at our magnet board we have on our wall right now, and we have magnets from every single place that we've traveled in the last 2 years. And we lived in England for 3 years, and in the last few months we did a ton of traveling. We went to Wales, Scotland, and Cornwall, in addition to a bunch of other places in England, and we gave our kids this traveling experience of seeing all of these really cool places in England before we moved. And I thought, wow, like, we are giving our kids that kind of experience. And maybe the extracurriculars will come in time, but I need to celebrate the life that we are creating and have created for our family instead of always comparing myself to what other people are doing. So this comes to the last point, is having compassion for your guilt. And I know for me, that guilt is just not going to go away. I wish that I could outgrow it. I wish that I could say, I'm beyond motherhood guilt, and I could just embrace myself and embrace my motherhood journey and my kids and everything that I do in my life. But that's just not true. The guilt is present. Motherhood guilt is just a reality. But I'm learning to create a kinder inner voice for myself. I remember a blog post I wrote several years ago and how I was just so down on myself. First, I think I was really struggling with my mental health and I didn't know it. I was really struggling with the way I interacted with my kids and just losing my temper all the time. I also didn't know how to interact with their ADHD, and we were just butting heads about that a lot. I hadn't cultivated the tools that I have now that help my relationships with them. So I'd given my son an instruction and he had done the exact opposite, and I just lost it with him. And my inner voice was just like, you are such a shit mom. You just are a terrible mom. And I just used this awful language and just heaped it upon myself, like bludgeoning my soul with just condemnation. You just like, you never get it right. You're a terrible mother. And later, I wrote a blog post about it and how I needed to have grace in those moments. And that was true. And I learned later that a way to have grace is to speak to myself like I was speaking to somebody that I loved. And I remember a good friend of mine that we would often exchange stories with. I'd write little messages to each other on Facebook saying, I just have a really hard moment with my son. I'm having a hard day. And we would just encourage each other back and forth. And I thought, wow, would I say that to my friend Debbie? Like, would I tell her, you're such a terrible mother. Like, how can you're just awful. You never get it right. Would I say that to her? Like, no. I would say, hey, that was a tough moment, but you came back and you apologized later to him. You need to be tender with yourself. You need to be kind. Remember that a bad moment doesn't mean that you have a bad life or that you're a bad mom. Like, you're doing okay. And I had to learn to have a kinder inner voice for myself instead of just heaping condemnation on those moments I felt like I was a bad mother. I also had to change the language for good mother and bad mother and that's something I'm still working on, because those voices come up again. to say, oh, you're such a bad mom. And I'm learning to say there's good mother and there's growing mother. And I'm growing. I'm still growing in the things that I want to improve in. I'm still growing in my relationship with my kids and in my relationship with myself. And so I'm not going to say you're a bad mom anymore to myself. I want to say you're a growing mother, or that could have gone better. Let's make different choices in the future. So in focusing on relationship versus these messages that I hear from the outside, instead of the rules that I make for myself or my kids, in focusing on celebration instead of guilt, and compassion instead of these unrealistic expectations, I'm learning to change the narrative in my own mind about the messages that I tell myself about being a good mom. And I hope that this podcast can give you some good food for thought in changing those messages for yourself so that you can move forward in tenderness, compassion, letting go of the guilt, and able to more celebrate your unique relationship with your child and yourself.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyameng@gmail.com. What, babe? Okay, yes. Okay, all right, here we go. Okay, we're back. Close the door, please.